Alright, so someone on the forum was looking for snapping in Max and some dimensional abilities or moving with dimensions. Um, I'm not gonna lie and say that this is particularly easy or one of Mac's strengths. This is a kind of animation modeling software, so precision is definitely not one of its strong suits. I mean, there are points in space and we can move them based on dimensions. So let's just get into that. I'm gonna go ahead and make a box. And every object in 3D Max has a position. We can get to that if we right click on any of the translation tools. You see here your move types, move, transform. So you can do absolute world, which is where it is in space in our 3D coordinate system. So if I move it up 4 feet, it's gone up 4 feet in the Z. This is a really big box. Let's go ahead and actually make our units one by one by one. I just hit Z to center on the object. And these are the relative positions. So if we set the absolute positions, sorry, if we set those to 0, 0, 0, that box is at 0, 0, 0 now. Now what we have is the offset world, and what this is relative positioning. If we want to move it in the X 10 feet from where it currently is, we can type 10 here. And see, so now we're plus 10 in our absolute world, and our offset world all went back to 0, because these are just relative positions. As an interface note, you can actually get to this down here as well. These are your absolute positions, but if you hit this icon, it turns it into your relative positions. So I can set that to 4 feet. You can see my absolute position changed. I can just turn that off and go to absolute. So that's interface, and that's just typing in positions. The question on the forum was how to maybe move something in a particular place. If you're moving at 90 degrees, then this method works just fine. If you're if you have something that's at an angle, then it becomes a little trickier. And again, this is where I'm going to say I don't really use Max as a fabrication tool, and I hate to keep using disclaimers, but I just want to be kind of clear about that. So let's go ahead and make a wall here. Actually, we don't want it to be curved. I'll do my kind of favorite modifier combo. Do an extrude, we'll do 10 feet, and then we'll shell it. So this is our wall. And we want to place a window on it, let's say. So we'll just make a box for now. I'll turn on auto grid so I can draw it on the object. So since I did auto grid, if I switch my gizmo type to local, you can see it's oriented to the object now. And so in a case like this, let me turn on my wireframes. I'm going to snap it to the corner and then move it the position I want. So to get into snaps a little bit, you can turn them on with this icon right here, and this is just your regular snaps. And if you right click on that icon, it brings up your snapping options. So here you have grid points, which snaps to the grid in Max like this, which to be honest I don't use. I think most people do use it, but I tend not to, because I try to model based off the geometry and make construction geometry when I need it. Pivot point is based on the pivot. Perpendicular, I wish worked better, but that's the idea, is it works perpendicular. You can snap and move things perpendicularly. Vertex is to a vertice. Edge or segment is anywhere, see, on an edge or on a segment. It's kind of like nearest in Rhino. Face is on a face. I'll go ahead and turn these off also so we're not intersecting here. Grid line is for anywhere on a grid line. Bounding box is for the bounding box of the object, and the bounding box is its perimeter in three-dimensional space. Tangent is for on curves. Endpoint is any endpoint, be it a vertice or an endpoint. Midpoint is just that, midpoint. And then center face is the center of a triangular face. So those are the different snapping types. And then here in your options for snapping, this is the size of the marker. Snap to frozen objects, whether you want it to snap or not. Some radius, and then this is for your angle snapping. And then here's the rubber band and using the axis constraints. That actually can come in pretty handy with snapping as well. This is governing your grid. I can make my grid smaller if I want, or bigger. And then the user grid. So let's go ahead and turn the snaps on. You have to have the object you want to move selected. Let me just move it here, kind of activate my snaps. Hit Z to kind of try to reorient. And see, the snaps aren't even turning on right now. And that could be because I don't have any snaps on, which I don't. So let's set endpoint on. And there it is, it's snapped to that corner. And now if I wanted to move it over 4 feet, I can move it in the offset world, in the X, 4 feet. And I just moved it 4 feet on that surface. And if I wanted to move it up 2 feet, that was the Z, the local Z. So that's because that's the way I made it. And it needs to be based on its local coordinate system. So we'll move it up 2 feet in the Y. So that's how I would do that and start to get some of this positioning. Or another way, if you wanted to cut it out of this wall, I would use, let's go ahead and add a couple segments. And turn off optimize and add some more segments here. So now we have this geometry. So I could go down in here and not show end result and put an edit poly modifier. So now let's go ahead and get this loop. We'll loop that. And if I wanted to align this bottom face with this top face, I'm going to use my axis constraints and snapping. And they're not up right now, so I'll just right click and bring up my axis constraints. So I want to align this face with the bottom of this. So I'm going to set my alignment in the Z. So now when I can snap that. Let's undo that. And here in my options, use axis constraints. So now I can snap it. See, I'm snapping to that corner, but it's still staying straight. It's only in the Z. So let's go ahead and do that with this one as well. Let's loop that, and we'll snap to there, but it still stays straight because it was only moving in the Z. So now we can go ahead and take that, and we'll turn off snapping with our axis constraints. And I'll snap that there. And snap, oh, that got messed up. And snap that there. So now at the poly level, we can select that polygon, delete it, go to our shell, and now we have that opening. And we know the position. So what I did was I built construction geometry for snapping. And that's often what I'll do in Max. And the same way I built that box and moved it relatively, at times I'll make a rectangle. So this one becomes a little trickier because you have to rotate it. But I'll go ahead and make a rectangle and give it my spacing. Kind of snap that there and affect the pivot point there. And I can move it now. So let's go ahead and turn on pivot as our snapping. And I'll hit S to turn the snapping on. You just kind of have to grab it and move it, and then the snap works. And then I'll rotate it. Again, not the most precise, but with some of the axis constraints we could get this to be 10 feet from this edge. And do that. So that's another way to kind of start to set up dimensions in Max, because we can't just draw out a line and make it 10 feet. We don't have a command line like we do in Rhino or in AutoCAD. So the last thing about snapping I want to show, if I go over here to the options, is angle snaps, because I use those quite a bit. And here the increment is set to 5, so you turn that on here. I'll hit regular S to turn that off. Now you can see up here in the yellow above my gizmo that I'm snapping with angles, and the keyboard shortcut for that is A. So with it off, see it, it's on right now and it's snapping in 5-degree increments. If I turn that off, I can kind of do whatever amount I want. So that's snapping and trying to move things with dimensions in Max. Hope that's helpful. If there's any questions, post them in the forum or the comment section.